When you think about the Oldham County Health Department, immunizations and exams may come to mind. But did you know that we also inspect the restaurants you ate at last week, the swimming pool you swam at this summer, and perhaps provided your child health information at school? Our purpose is to offer preventative health services for all Oldham County residents, of which many are mandated or regulated by the state and federal government. Public health programs exist to protect your health and the health of the community. Some of the health department's programs are available at our health clinic, but many others are provided in your neighborhood, in schools, hotels, businesses, in your home, and beyond.
I never use the watermark for my talks as about how many people show up. It's just plain disappointing for somebody who brings me down here to do this program, but that's no impact on you guys or anything else. It's just the way it is in our society nowadays. People have important stuff to do, so I'm not going to say anything beyond that. I've been working on a project for 14 years called the Human Performance Project. I spent 20 years with Olympic sport before I started this project, and Human Performance Project is to look at things people overlook, and to a great extent, some of those things like Craig mentioned, like sleep and proper nutrition and micronutrients and minerals and vitamins, and we're just seeing these things depleted out of human bodies, and we're seeing people's bodies filled with poisons and toxins and drugs. And if you look at just how unhealthy the average person is today, it's sort of a barometer not just of that individual, but of society and our kids. And I think everybody knows the direction that our country has taken, even if you just look at how many chemicals people are on. It's unbelievable. So 14 years ago, I left Olympic sport to start working on this Human Performance Project. A lot of it centers on the brain and central nervous system. The last frontier. As a physiologist, I studied human performance, heart, lungs, and muscle, blood chemistry, ventilation, all that stuff, for 20 years of my life. But it's been studied for over 60 years at a very high level. And now we're looking at the last thing we really probably should have looked at first, which is the brain and central nervous system, which has more impact on athletic performance, really, than heart, lungs, and muscles. So just to give you some ideas, I was a pretty good athlete when I was a young man, and I went on to college. I got a college scholarship, and I was an NCAA All-American. I was a distance runner. I actually competed 12 years after college, and I went out to Oregon and ran for Bowerman, the guy that started Nike. And I ran some pretty good times and got to race in Europe and around the world, and it was a fantastic life, honestly. And it was back when there was no money, you didn't get paid anything, and you had to be an amateur. And that's all comical now, but I loved it, and I did it because I wanted to be a good athlete, plain and simple. Since that time, I've got to do some pretty amazing things as a result of the investment. But I went to study in Europe, and I actually talked to some kids today about the difference of going to school in Europe and going to school in the United States. And no slam on the rest of our society. If we want to get on the list from the way things used to be, the way we were, I guess we could retitle that. But our educational system's severely broken. I think everybody knows it. We're no longer the head of the list anymore. We're way back in the pack. And the reason is we have put too much faith in things like test scores, and it's such an impractical and theoretical education compared to practical education that actually is based on problem solving and communication and cooperation. It's just dysfunctional. So it's nice when you talk to young people to say that if you went to Europe to be a teacher, the first month you were there, you would start observing elementary kids, and then you would teach elementary kids. In your second year, you would observe middle school kids, and you would teach middle school kids. In your third year, you would observe high school kids and teach high school kids. And your fourth year, you would observe college students and teach college, the whole gamut from education beginning to education end. And then you would want to be a good teacher, and you probably would have the intelligence and knowledge to be one. Here we wait and go to school for 4 years, and then we student teach, and then you might decide that, hey, I don't even want to do this. So, I mean, it's sort of doomed from the beginning. But it's a point I have, which is to say this: a practical education is worth so much more than a theoretical education. And when I went there, I got a practical education. I was from the first week there drawing blood, taking blood samples, working with Olympic athletes, and it was just phenomenal. So I came back from Finland after 3 years in studying human performance and physiology to look for a place to coach, and they had just opened the Eastern Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, and Lake Placid is a beautiful place. It's just, I mean, without saying any more to promote it than this, it's like being in Central Europe somewhere. It's an alpine village. It's just beautiful. And Craig was there, and a girl, Elizabeth, came to our place, and it's a pretty special town. You can imagine a town of 2,500 people putting on the Olympics not once but twice. It's just bizarre, you know, and it'll never happen again. So they have an educational center and a laboratory there, and I worked in there at the Olympic Training Center for over 20 years doing those tests on athletes, about 14,000 tests over 20 years. And that's measuring those capacities athletes have for all their physical performance, and the things we can measure are just incredible. From the time I started my career to today, it's like, you know, using 2 tin cans and a string for a phone. I don't know, we've come light years with being able to give instantaneous results and really give feedback that's spot on for connecting it to training so you can help athletes, and just phenomenal. And I coached the whole time. I had 28 Olympic athletes I coached. And like Craig said, we go to a lot of schools. The United States Navy SEALs have used the program. This is the kind of guys I work with on a day-to-day basis, and it's just phenomenal. When you think of people who are serious, that's the kind of people that seek out our program. And I always say, if you're an athlete, shouldn't you be serious? I mean, you know, you think of the time investment alone of being involved in middle school or high school sports. It's enormous. When you think of kids at this age, they're probably spending more time with their coach than they're spending with their parents. It's just the way it is. We did too, to a great extent. But these kids also spend a lot more time with their buddies and friends. It's seldom that they're even disconnected from their buddies and friends. Even if they're not with them, they're with them. And you know what I'm talking about with their communication forms. So working with the Navy Special Warfare Human Performance Project has been huge. We have a laboratory in Virginia. That's the only picture that even exists of that lab. And it's a multi-zillion-dollar project. It's classified. But we basically changed how we trained these guys about 5 years ago. It's been written about, and it's pretty cool to have been involved on the ground floor of that project. And we basically train these guys for the skill sets they need to be successful in doing what they do. And I told the kids today, I said, you know, I don't know, at a young age, maybe you don't appreciate maybe the opportunities that you have. You're sort of oblivious to it when you're a teenager. But you owe a lot of people for those opportunities that you are presented with. And you also owe people like this, and I think like we probably owed our great-grandparents and grandparents who died in those first 2 wars. And you know, I mean, these are the people that give you the chance to live in this country where you can be whatever you want to be if you want to be it. And I just think that we need to also remind people of that. So anyway, recovery is another big area that I talk about a lot. People seek me out for programs on how you can recover quicker so you can be back at, you know, your optimal form to perform at a high level. I just actually got back from Brazil. I spoke to the entire Olympic 110 countries worldwide Elite Sport Forum. It's 2 years before the Olympics. I was one of the 6 speakers, and it was just awesome. And I was down in Brazil for a week, and man, it's a beautiful country, but boy, if you think we have a huge disparity here between rich and the bottom of the food chain, you should see it down there. Just absolutely frightening. I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years studying brain-body connection. Spoke to some pretty big populations, been on some great plenaries with some brain scientists, and really have tried to connect how your brain runs your body and make kids realize that, you know, the greatest concern you should have for your health is the health for your mind. And I don't think that that's where we necessarily start. We have people nowadays that have no concern for any form of their health, body or mind, or spirit. I just look at how people have lost the whole shooting match. And so it's to try to get people to realize that your brain controls your body. What we term now central nervous system readiness is the #1 factor in being successful in the classroom, music, art, dance, sports, you name it. Work. How about work output? You know, do you want 5 days of work and 40 hours out of a person you hire, or do you want, you know, 3 days of work, and the rest of the time they're there, but they're not doing much. These are things we're trying to work with in populations, all different kinds of populations. So just to show you some stuff about the brain processes during physical activity and sport about 400 billion points of data per second. That's a lot for the brain to do. Most of it's happening right up in the very front of your brain, behind your forehead. About 100,000 chemical reactions per second during athletic competition. I mean, that's a lot for your brain to do. And we're also measuring the fatigue levels in the brain now that we know how important it is. And that's what we basically now call brain drain. All right, how do you fatigue the brain? How long does it take for the brain to bounce back? How dysfunctional are you for what you're signing up for? And if you can imagine going in to talk to guys in special ops about this, guys whose lives depend on it, well, they listen. We don't go in with theories. We go in with, this is a fact. This is the way it is. And those guys want that information because that may be the difference of life and death. So one of the things we came across was the incredible information overload as far as input into the brain nowadays. All right, in the last 30 years, or in the last few years, the population of the planet has gotten younger and younger. Half the Earth's population now is under the age of 30, and technology is going through the roof, and it's never going back. I mean, if there's old people who are afraid to have a computer or an iPhone, well, then so be it, but it's not going to change for them. It's, you got to change with the way people communicate, and that's where we are now. But even athletes now have this overload of information input. And even if you think about the brain, which is your cognitive function, thinking functions, it's up behind your forehead, it's a very small part of the brain. If that gets fatigued, does that affect you physically? Well, I think maybe you probably all know the answer before I start. So think of this. We now take in or are exposed to more information in the last 50 years than the previous 5,000 years. That's a lot of info, all right? And that's got to be processed, whether the information is unconsciously or consciously processed. It's got to be processed by the brain. You got to sort out what you keep, what you throw away. It's no different than this. You're watching a great TV show. Hopefully it's, PBS, not Jersey Shore. And you're watching the TV show, and an ad comes on every once in a while. And you can tune out the ads, but you still hear it. And if you're watching, you still watch it. And that's still got to be processed by your brain. It's just mindless. And even if you mute it and you're watching it, it's still information. You're still seeing it. It's still going in your brain. So that's a lot of overload. So I'll tell you a story, and I told this to the kids today. My wife is from Europe. She had a friend who had an 18-month-old baby, and the baby was allowed to play with a tablet. That's the picture. And the baby one day in the winter was standing at the sliding glass door looking out in the backyard, and there was a squirrel in the backyard, and the baby was going like this on the glass of the window trying to enlarge the view of the squirrel. So if you think about the scariness of technology, I don't think it's bad or evil. I just think that the younger you start kids using technology, the more they're going to use it and the more obsessed they are with using it. It's no different than thinking about if you had 3 kids, look at the age that you bought the first kid their cell phone, the second one, and the third one. I had a friend, and it went like 12, 9, 6. And his third daughter got her cell phone at age 6, a real good friend of mine in Finland. And he told that story, and I said, well, that's my point. If they have the technology, they're going to be playing with it. Not just using it for, call me if something bad happens. Using it all the time. And to stay connected with your buddies and friends. And a lot of that stuff is just, again, more input for the brain. So the part of the brain that we use for all that information processing and also to decide what to do with the information is the frontal part of the brain. And as it becomes fatigued, and we call it neural fatigue, it basically starts to work its way backwards. So if we look at 3 parts of the brain, there's the thinking part. This huge area is the part that we actually call pre-movement. It's where you stack the sequence of movements you're going to make before you move them or make them. And here's the area for sending signals for physical movement. As an example, if I was going to pick up this laser pointer, I'm using the blue zone right now to think about doing it. I've already stacked the sequence of movements I'm going to make to do it, and then I just go do it. So there's an example. But if we fatigue this part of the brain, what happens is it just works its way back and fatigues each successive part of the brain. It's like layers. Ironically, this is exactly the same way most drugs work. They start by just little sensations and starting to affect the frontal part of the brain, then it works into pre-movement, and it works into movement. It's like alcohol does the same exact thing. It's like a wave. It works from front to back. You drink 1 to 2 drinks. It's just up here. Third drink, you're already into pre-movement, so you've already affected movement. Third, fourth drink here, fifth, sixth drink here. If you drink 20 drinks, it works its way all the way back to your brainstem at the back of your brain, and you're dead. All right, so we've studied this stuff, and it's really interesting. But we know that that's a huge problem for people. We also know that neural fatigue is connected to other things like releasing hormones, the time differential between your heartbeats. We're using this now for everything. It's called heart rate variability. The time differential between your heartbeats is identical if your body is rested and ready to function at a high level. If it's not, then you've got glitches. And we have systems to measure this now. So anyway, there's a lot of things that are connected to the brain. One of the things we can measure now is stress in the brain. If you look, red is activity, blue is parts of the brain that are chilling. And as this spins around, you can see the thinking part of the brain is totally chilling. This is at the back of the brain, so it's visual cortex or brainstem activity, probably some of both. Here's the same person when they're stressed, all right? We know that this is the most stressed out generation in history of kids. It's unprecedented. It can be, I can quantify and qualify that statement with one statistic. 54 million kids on meds. What do you want to say about that? There's nothing you could possibly argue. ADD, ADHD, antidepressants, all these different drugs that we have kids on. And many of these kids are on a huge cocktail mix of these drugs because over time we start to figure out that, okay, this is a side effect, okay, so take this. And the pharma that has basically ruined the basic chemistry of a young person's human body now. And now we start to wonder what's causing the problems, the problem or the drugs. And we're there. It's not like something that we've really tried to alleviate by every other means. We have just done this, and it's pretty common. I will tell you this, that 51% of all Americans, men, women, and children, are on some prescription drug today, 51%. So think about that. And if maybe you're at home and you're wondering about that statement, then do this. Think about any drug that anyone in your household is on, a prescription drug, all right? And then start to look, and you'll find that it's about 51%. So we have systems now to measure stress. If you look at this, it's a 24-hour printout. Let's start over here. This is heart rate variability, the time differential between your heartbeats. Here's somebody sleeping, so you can see it's light blue. They're sleeping, but they went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. Here's midnight. 1 o'clock in the morning, they started sleeping. And if you see they're sleeping, so we know from heart rate variability they're asleep. Oh, here's some activity. Red is stress. Here, in the middle of the night is some stress. Well, I can tell you what the stress probably is. They probably got up to go to the bathroom. And that created a change in heart rate variability. So physical activity is shown there, so that registers as stress. And here's more sleep, went back to sleep. And they slept till 7 in the morning. That's 6 hours of sleep. And this is an Olympic athlete. Here's stress as soon as they wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they have a workout from 9:30 to 11 o'clock in the morning. So we can tell that dark blue is a different kind of heart rate variability, so there's a workout. And for an hour and a half they worked out. It was a very hard workout, and then all day long you have stress. Okay? Red is stress. Well, human body was made to be up for 16 hours, down for 8. It hasn't changed. It's just that we do more than 16 now. We do 17, 18, 19, 20. Humans are pushing it further and further, that we're up and awake and stressed more. So this workout was supposed to be on a scale of 10, an 8, a 9, or a 10. It was a high-quality workout. It included some Olympic lifts with heavy weights, some plyometrics and short sprints. It was a bobsledder. And if you look at the printout, you can see he did the workout. And when they take, after the workout, a scale of what was it on a scale of 10, he said it was a 3 or a 4. Well, it's easy to say, well, you didn't sleep. How do you expect to feel good enough to train at a high level the next day? So this is what we can prove to people without any question, is that there's always a reason why this doesn't go the way it should. It's that you didn't get enough sleep. So let's talk about stress. Let's talk about other things like Facebook and minimal sleep and pot and alcohol and McDonald's and TV and all kinds of things that people deal with now. And those are things that we need to talk about because these are our kids. And my goal in this is not to tell somebody how to live their life. My goal in this is to try to show people that there's some things that should be taken into consideration to live your life better. This is a chart of biorhythms or circadian rhythms. If you travel a lot, you know about this because you're screwed up all the time because you're always in different time zones and you come home and it's even more messed up, and then you just get used to that and you go on another trip and it's a disaster. But it's no different for somebody who never gets into a pattern of sleep Or it would be like eating your meals at different times every day. Instead of eating them in the morning, noon, and night, you would eat them totally different times. Your body can't get used to the curves you're throwing at, so it throws all your systems into this total state of stress. And I say we have athletes now who live their life based on random events, all right? I can say this right now, if you want your son or daughter to be a great athlete, or if you athletes watching this want to be a great athlete, then you have to learn right away that athletes are creatures of habit. You get up the same time, you train the same time, you eat at the same time, you do the same things at the same time. That allows your body to adapt. There can't be any adaptation when you live your life like this. You're constantly throwing yourself curves. So we make these modules, studies on sleep. A lot of them were done at Stanford. We also found studies done by the military and NASA. The Power Back Diet. All the answers to nutrition for athletes. It's been published now. It's been used by so many populations. What to eat the night before a game, what to eat the morning of a competition, what to eat in between rounds, how to put on mass without all these supplements and drugs and compounds that kids are taking that are so dangerous. All the secrets to athlete nutrition in one little document, 27 pages long. It's all there. Read it. Everything you could want to know for your son or daughter as a student athlete, or you athletes, what you want to know to take nutrients in your body that you can function at a high level. It's all there. So the Power Back Diet is huge. It gives athletes answers for human performance, but also it gives anybody answers for human performance. Foods that when you take them in your body produce the most energy back. Think of like a healthy meal like this or this. All right? Well, if you choose what's on the right, to a good luck having energy. Good luck being healthy. Somebody asked me recently, if you're training at a real high level and you're a real good athlete, how many times in 10 days could you eat like McDonald's? I said, how about 0? You know what I mean? Like, you want an honest answer? How about 0? What can you turn that into? What can you do with that besides feel lousy? So think of this. We have 160,000 fast food restaurants now in the United States. 50 million people every day go to them. Only 50 million. So it's a mess. It's a train wreck. 30% of Americans are overweight. 35% are obese. 65% of our population is either overweight or obese. All right, so there we are. There's where it sits, and that's a disaster. One of the things we discovered from our project is this, that about 8 out of 100 people could be a top athlete. That's quite a statement. If I go to a high school and somebody says, I say, how are your sports? And they go, well, we just don't have any talented kids. I just laugh. Because I know that looking at the Human Genome Project, they basically found not just that you had about 20,000 genes, they thought there were hundreds of thousands, and they could attribute some of those to your maternal or paternal or both genetic lineages. They also discovered some other things. One of them is this, that about 8% of people possess physical attributes that would basically predispose you to have a pretty good aptitude for being a top athlete or doing something very physical. Maybe it's heart and lung size, muscle fiber type, lots of different body type. How about body type? I mean, if you want to be a great volleyball player and you're this tall, I mean, that's going to maybe not be how it shakes out. So we basically took that information and we said, okay, like if 8 out of 100 kids could be a top athlete, that's a talent. Don't you think there's a percent in the human population from music and art and engineering and science and technology and all that? Of course there is. So that's what we have to find in kids and help them find it, but then they have to invest in it. And that's the other part of our message is that you have these talents within you, but you have to find them and do something with it. And that's important for kids to know at a young age too. So 8 out of 100 or about 1 out of every 13 kids maybe could be a great athlete. I think sometimes maybe parents jump the gun and have more of a dream that their kid's a great athlete than the kid has talent, but I mean, that's not an unfair statement. A lot of the investment and the ownership of an athletic career has got to come at a very young age from the athlete himself or herself. And that's important not to forget. So if you have talent, that's great. If you don't, maybe you can work harder than somebody that has talent. And I can tell you this, I coached 28 Olympic athletes. 15 were hard workers, 13 were talents. And I've put the names on the papers. People who wanted more than somebody who was way more talented, the same thing, and basically took it from the talented person. How many adults watching the show know somebody who had an amazing ability or talent in all different kinds of things that just wasted it, squandered it, watered it down, gave it away, threw it away? Those things happen too. And those are probably the most tragic stories that could be told. Somebody who had a gift and just wasted it. Other people will never find those gifts. They'll just never stumble onto it. Somebody who never went out for the thing that they were most suited for. Think of it. So this is the UCLA Brain Development Study. Basically what they did is they kept people in a study for over 20 years, and it was done at UCLA Brain Science Center. What you're watching here sped up into a matter of seconds is a brain from birth to age 21 reaching greater and greater levels of competency, ability, function, and so forth. And they found an amazing thing out in the study, and it's this, that age 12 to 21 is the last phase of brain development, from about puberty or hormonal onset until just about the time you're getting out of college. And this is a really important time frame, and we'll talk about why. Basically, you make connections in your brain even before you're born. Matter of fact, before you're born, or on the day you were born, there were more connections in your brain for functions than you could possibly keep connected. So if you think of these connections in the brain like extension cords, when you're born, you have about 1 trillion connections, and there's no way to keep them connected, because in order to keep brain connections functioning, you have to practice or utilize those connections. And with that many connections, you wouldn't have enough hours in the day. So basically, you train your brain to make connections, and if you practice those things and keep doing them, they stay connected. About 95% of the human brain is developed by the age of 6, and then one of the biggest phases left is that time frame from age 12 to age 21. Here it is. Experience and practice, you keep those things connected. When you learn something, you make connections, but then you have to practice them. Anything. Think about it. Music, art, dance, drawing, writing, speaking, language, everything that you could possibly do. Skills in sport. What happens if you don't practice them? The skills get rusty, right? You start getting random outcomes. So at 8 months, there's 1 trillion connections in the brain. There's no way to keep them connected. They start to disconnect. Here is those 3 biggest phases of brain growth. Pre-birth, birth, up to age 1. Mostly you're learning how to use your senses. From age 1 to age 12, motor skill development and language. The best time to learn a language, before the age of 12. Try to learn a language after age 12. It's very difficult. It's way hard for adults to learn languages. And last but not least, from age 12 to 21, huge amount of brain development for higher cognitive function, all those mature capacities you're going to use to prepare yourself for your future for sure, and skills as far as skill perfection and efficiency and doing physical movement. So these are really the 3 biggest phases of brain development for anybody, us as adults or children. At age 2, a kid's brain has twice as many connections as a full-grown adult brain, which is amazing to think about. And anything stimulates them. That's why kids can't pay attention. They hear a noise, they go over here. They look out the window, they go over here. Everything is interesting to them because their brains are like sponges. They're taking in so much through their senses, they're just sucking up information, all right? And that's why kids can't focus, all right? So as you reach age 12 or 13, what happens is you can't keep these connected, so your brain says, okay, well, then we lose these. Look how much pruning begins at age 12 or 13. Pruning is like no different than saying this. You have a tree in your yard and it's got a dead branch on it, and you can say, well, that's pretty ugly, and just leave it. And people will drive by and say, well, why does John not cut that branch off? Or you can go up there with a ladder and saw it off, all right? It's almost like that. You have these connections, they're not being used, so they basically disconnect, and they can't be reconnected. So pruning really takes off at age 12 or 13 in adolescence and continues into adulthood. So birth to age 3 is huge for brain development. Second biggest phase, 12 to 21, these teen years, up to about the time you get out of college. Here's the actual study from UCLA. On the left is age 4 or 5. At the yellow line is age 12 or 13, hormonal onset or puberty. And over here on the right is age 21. Look at orange or yellow as a representation of a brain reaching greater and greater levels of ability, competency, skills, and so forth. And then think of this. Look how much more yellow comes into the picture from 6th or 7th grade, age 12 or 13, to age 21. And the last parts of the brain to develop, right up to age 21, are the areas responsible for reasoning, moral reasoning, and decision making. So as a parent of a young person, you know, we got a little tiny kid, we make all their decisions for them because they can't. As they become a teenager, we start letting them make some decisions. If they make good choices, we usually give them more opportunity to make more choices. If not, we reel it in usually. That's like the model for parenting. And then when those kids even go away to college, they still need so much guidance because their brain is not fully developed for these really important capacities. So, you know, just because someone leaves your home, don't think they don't need some help in these last 3 developmental areas. Another thing they found out from this study was that the developing brain, especially age 12 to 21, if you damage it, will take the biggest hit of your entire lifespan. The most susceptible that the brain is for damage in your entire lifespan is age 12 to 21, when it's going through that final phase of brain development. From anything, concussions, drugs, massive head injury, anything.